That's all right. All right then, guys. Thank you all for coming. This is going to be the first of a series of presentations that we're going to be doing with the Smiling Seahorse. Yeah, I really appreciate you all coming to check out the first one. It's a great, diverse group of people on this Singapore, so I'm really excited to get to know you all. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you already, but if I haven't had a proper chat with you, I definitely will by the end of the day. So I will introduce myself. I'm Gavin. I originally studied in the UK. My undergraduate degree was in psychology, but I focused on environmental psychology, so how we can use behaviours to raise awareness for the ocean, change perceptions and attitudes towards conservation. And I published a paper looking at communication towards microplastics. So that's a shameless plug there if you guys want to have a look at it. That's on the slide. I then went and studied my master's degree in the UK as well, and that was more biology focused in marine environmental management. So taking in all parts of conservation science, including tropical marine ecology, which has led me to where I am now. And I'm currently working in Koh Tao, Thailand, with an organisation called Global Reef, and I'm the research project manager and scientific dive program director at the organisation in Koh Tao. So, a little bit about Global Reef, just as some context. We're a scientific research and education centre based in Koh Tao. And we have the aim of connecting a global audience with the marine world, so anywhere, anytime, using a range of different methods. So we try to combine traditional scientific methods, so the surveys that you may well have seen and heard of in terms of science, with more technological innovation. So we're using things like virtual reality to go around to schools and offer pupils the chance to go on an underwater dive, even if they've never seen the ocean. We also use things like 3D modelling, so photogrammetry techniques, to map the seabed and the coral reefs to look at changes over time. If there's threats such as bleaching, then we can track the changes with these models that we create. We use aerial surveys, so drones, and also AI and machine learning to try and detect certain threats in the reef. So at the moment, my research is focusing around a few different things. I'm focused on crown of thorns starfish research at the moment. So the crown of thorns are a sea star which feed on coral, and they're known around the world as being quite a negative organism. But in fact, they have a really, really important role in the reef, and I'll do a whole presentation on that later in the week. Also, artificial reef and shipwreck research. So comparing fish communities between a natural reef and an artificial reef. And then we also do coral restoration and general health monitoring of the local reefs. So, across the next 9 days, I have a series of 8 presentations listed here, starting with today, Adaptations for Predation. Also put together a few extra workshops which aren't going to be part of the schedule. So, just a background on animal behaviour and why we study what is known as behavioural ecology. So behaviour in the environment. This is studies between individuals of the same species, but also individuals of different species, as well as how these species interact with their environment. So there's a range of different things that we can be looking within behavioural ecology, and we will go through a few examples of each throughout the course of these lectures. Studying behaviours is really, really important for science, but as well as just being generally aware and interested. As divers, we want to learn more, but it can be really, really important for science and conservation. So by studying behaviours, we can reveal information on 3 or 4 main different areas. So we can reveal information on the individual. So this is their role within the environment, whether they're predator or prey, and their ecological role. So certain species inhabit a specific role within the ecosystem. So by studying their behaviour, we can potentially identify this role. We can also spot important interactions between the animal and the environment. So what threats are there to this organism? If this organism is removed, what will happen to the potential environment? And we can then actually predict certain threats and issues that may arise through the loss of species. We can also look through the evolution of behaviours, so why some organisms have evolved to have one massive claw and one tiny claw, and there's very, very specific things that, or why they have evolved this, and we can look at the reasons why this has evolved to fit their things they need to do in their life. And like I said as well, threats to the species as well as the conservation. All of this provides towards potential information that we can use to conserve the ocean environment. So moving on to some sort of predation specific stuff. As I said, how important it is to study behaviours. Say we have this fish here. This is a grouper. I'm sure a lot of you have seen groupers before, but let's wipe our memory and imagine we have never seen this fish before in our life, but we just see a photo in front of us there. From this one image, we can actually tell up to 6 different important things just based on its behaviour. So, first of all, we can see, based on some more body type from this fish, that it has an upwards facing jaw and teeth, so we know that it's a predator. It's something that feeds, most presumably, on some smaller fish. Things like silversides, smaller wrasse, and smaller damselfish. So we can tell that this is a predator. Beyond that, because it's a predator, we can assume that it's something that is very commercially targeted and something that might be vulnerable to extraction. So in Thailand, the grouper is a delicacy, very delicious. And it's something that actually has been witnessed to be extracted quite a lot from the reefs around Thailand. And it also, with this particular species, they take a very long time to reach their maturity, so up to 25 years until they reproduce. So removing these in great number can completely wipe out a population. Because it's potentially vulnerable, then we know that it's probably something that's worth monitoring. So this is something that we can do in our assessments, our grouper assessments, or our fish surveys that we do in all conservation science. We can also tell, because of this coloration, it's likely that it's evolved to exhibit forms of camouflage and background matching. So you can see here 2 different types of grouper, and they very well match their background. This is because they are ambush predators, which I'll go on to in a bit. They sit and wait for fish to come to them, and they need to match the background to not be detected. This also shows us, though, if we lose that environment or the coral that this grouper is actually known to match in terms of its coloration, then that fish will no longer be able to hunt and it could be gone. And finally, because we know its habitat, its behaviours, we can actually design things like artificial reefs to then deploy in the environment in the hope of saving that species. So from one picture we can tell all of that. This is why behaviours are so important. So predation, as you all probably know, but if not, is the consumption of organisms, so hunting. We might have seen it already today, some of the big trevally hunting around the smaller baitfish, and this is a really, really important part of the ecosystem on coral reefs, and in fact all ecosystems across the world. There's various different types of predation, so we have foraging, which involves going out and looking for certain things, usually smaller prey like crabs, crustaceans, things like that. But we also have ambush, as I said, with the groupers sitting and waiting for food to come to them. Pursuit, which is more like the trevally that we've seen already. They will be targeting their fish and then moving really quickly in pursuit of that prey. We have deception, as the famous octopus down here, using lots of different techniques to mask its identity and then actually deceiving its prey. And finally, scavenging, so things that will just eat, or opportunistic feeders that will feed on things that are already dead, dying, or being fed on by other organisms. So, just going to talk a little bit about the importance of predation on the environment. So, this is something called top-down control. And understanding behaviours allow us to understand the threats in the environment, like I've already said. Predation is a key part of the coral reef ecosystem and community structure on the reef. So there's an example here talking, this is actually the first time that predation, or the importance of predation, was really documented in 1966 by a scientist called Payne, and he looks at certain sea stars in the environment. And these sea stars are known as keystone species. So think of a keystone as many blocks in a pyramid, or Jenga, if you like. You remove one and everything comes toppling down. So this particular study showed that this species of sea star was disproportionately playing a larger role in keeping that community structure balanced. The removal of this sea star created a huge imbalance in the reef, and fast-growing organisms that it would usually feed on as a top predator, such as barnacles and mussels, ended up outcompeting the reef. And I'm sure we all know of certain examples around the world where one organism can become dominant and actually destroy the reef. So in South Africa or California, it's like the urchin eating all the kelp forests. That's a keystone species. And the same as in coral reefs, actually, with things like crown prawns. So on this trophic pyramid, trophic meaning food web, so in the pyramid of the food web, the marine environment actually has a really, really unique makeup. If we look at or imagine terrestrial ecosystems, so an African savanna, for example, we will have miles and miles and miles of grass, lots and lots of what we call producers, being the grass, the very low biomass organism, but it's in great abundance. And then above that, we have many herbivores feeding on these producers. All the way up to the top, where we have one apex predator, which are in a very, very small population. So if we look at lions or cheetahs or bears or wolves, these guys are normally in small numbers, maybe one pack that roams a very, very large area, feeding on the numerous herbivores on the environment. Underwater, it's flipped on its head, completely reversed. So we have such an abundance of lower trophic or lower biomass organisms, so plankton, seagrass, algae, things that are very, very abundant, but yeah, they don't have much energy. We have such an abundance of that we are able to sustain an even greater number of top carnivores. And this is why on healthy, untouched, pristine, pelagic reefs out to sea, we should see many, many sharks, as you would imagine seeing on planet Earth 3. Hundreds of sharks in your field of view, and that is the sign of a truly pristine reef, because there is so much available food on that ecosystem to provide for these predators. So predators maintain these populations. They remove the middle organisms on the food web to stop them from becoming imbalanced and ending up destroying the ecosystem. So I'm just going to run through a few different examples of predation that we can actually see, hopefully, on our dives over the next week. Some of them actually we might have seen. There's one already that I have seen on my first dive. So yeah, we'll talk through some of these and hopefully you guys get to see them. So the first is something that we all want to see, reef sharks. Reef sharks are obviously well, all sharks are very, very famous. Unfortunately, also very, very persecuted around the world. But I hope that we get a chance to see some on this trip. So reef sharks are considered opportunistic feeders. So they feed primarily on anything that they can get their hands on, but they deploy a very large range of tactics to be able to feed. They are very adaptable to different environments. So they actually feed on organisms that are usually sick or weak or injured or dying, and they're almost like the cleaners of the ocean. So they feed on things, in survival of the fittest really, on things that else wouldn't survive, and they actually do a service to the environment. But in order to target these fish, or these prey organisms, they have very, very sensitive and acute organs which pick up a lot of different changes in the water environment. So things like pressure, vibration, electromagnetic fields, they all have sharks have organs to pick up these changes. So one of the things that they have is a lateral line, which a lot of fish have, but a shark have a lateral line that is extremely sensitive to electromagnetic fields, and this is they use this to travel very large distances in search of their prey. Underneath their skin, connected to this lateral line, is a series of cell structures with a very scientific name called ampullae of Lorenzini. Now these are electroreceptors which are specifically designed to pick up changes in vibration in the water, which is why you might have heard you splash around near a shark, it's going to be interesting. So these cell structures, the ampullae of Lorenzini, these are cavities in the skin which are filled with jelly, like a jelly-like substance. And when there's a change in vibration, this jelly resonates. And then this resonation is fed through a very sensitive nerve ending through the neurons into the brain, and the shark then knows that that's a target. So if you imagine a weak or struggling fish, then this is how it's targeting that specific fish, knowing that it's weak because it's very unique patterns of movement. Maybe it's injured and it can't swim properly, or it's on the surface flapping. This is how they pick up those cues to then predate on this organism. And as I said, they play a really, really important role in cleaning up weaker fish on the reef ecosystem. Next, something that I guess we probably won't see, but you never know.
Maybe.
Blackwater dives. Yeah, never say never, exactly. Blackwater dives. So, anglerfish, famous on Finding Nemo for being very scary. These guys have evolved a really, really cool way of hunting. So they have evolved, as everyone knows, this sort of fishing rod with a light on the end. And this is a form of biomimicry. It's called biomimicry because it's a biological part of the body which has evolved to mimic something that is not biological, light. So inside their rod, they have, it's called an elysium, but the rod is fine. They have a form of bioluminescence, which is formed by bacteria that live inside this organ, and a biochemical process creates light, very similar to the algae and things we see when we see bioluminescence. This anglerfish with the light is basically doing something called sensory exploitation. So what this means is it's taking advantage of something in the environment that other fish, its prey, normally would be getting a benefit from. So small fish in the deep where there's no light, if there's light, they want to go to it because it provides them with a benefit. They can see predators, they can see prey, they're a lot easier and less energy costly to go about their lives. But this fish has exploited that benefit and turned it into its hunting mechanism. So basically it's using this to exploit the light and then sit there, wait as a fisherman would for the fish to come to it and then engulf its prey. A really, really highly evolved predation technique that has evolved over millions and millions of years. It's not always light. Sometimes these anglerfish have mimicked a worm on the end and they wiggle a worm around. And yeah, this is still sensory exploitation. Something that we definitely will see, and I saw today already, and the reason I'm bringing this one up because it might seem quite boring, but I like to shed light on things that are often overlooked on dives. We're all looking for the sharks and the mantas and the newly ranked, but these guys are, they're not in the limelight. But these are really interesting to a nerd like me. The breams. So this guy is called the monocle, but they're all monocle breams, but this is a monocle bream that we will see on these dives for sure. These also have a lateral line, which goes along the fish, and again, very, very sensitive to movement and electromagnetic reception. They use this to basically target prey. They're feeding on small invertebrates and crustaceans underneath the sand, so they cannot see them, but they know they're there from changes in movement. In order to hunt these subbenthic or below the sand prey, they basically use something that you guys can all look out for, and I think it's a really cool thing to once you know what it is. They use this start-stop locomotion.
So what you'll see when you see this guy specifically swimming around is he'll be swimming and then just stop dead. And then swim again, stop dead, swim again, stop dead. And what he's doing is sensing directly beneath him the changes from the prey and the movements underneath the sand, and then just pinpointing where it is. And if you watch for long enough, it's going to go, stop, and then pluck in the sand and take its prey. So it's something that, again, like I said, is really overlooked in dives, but it's a great example of predation on the reefs, and we can see it all the time. And then the final example to give you guys is, again, something we're always going to see, going back to this camouflage from certain organisms, or crypsis as it's known. The groupers, wide range of groupers that we've probably seen quite a few of already, and hopefully we'll see more. But these groupers, again, have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to match certain backgrounds. So whether that be sponges, rocks, sand, or sort of bouldering coral. They've evolved to match that really, really well. And this camouflage aids them in that sit and wait ambush predation. So they'll be sitting there, a fish will come on, and they'll extend their jaw, creating a pressure change which will suck the fish in, and they'll be engulfed live whole. They don't chew, they just gobble their food up, and they will just then sit and wait for the next thing to swim. These, again, are only predation methods that work when they're in the right environment. So this guy is not going to do very well feeding compared to this guy because he doesn't match his background whatsoever. Fish are going to see him from a mile off, as we would too, photographers. So yeah, these are something that we're always going to see, but it's a really great example of how fish on the reef have evolved these predation methods over hundreds of thousands of years that are very, very specifically tailored to their environment. Cool. So, a few take-home messages from this presentation today. Reef life has a very fragile balance, and predators are so important for maintaining that balance on the reef. If you remove one predator, then it could all fall out of balance, and then you remove the keystone species, everything can come falling down. We can see examples of predation adaptations everywhere on the reef, and there are certain things that we can look at which we might not have even known they were there. So things like the monocle green, we can now look out for that, and I just want you to maybe sit there for a few minutes if you see one and look at that stop-start locomotion, because it's really interesting even how they just swim like that. And finally, some predators have evolved over a very, very long time to basically affect their environment for hunting. And if they lose this, then they might not be able to hunt, and we might lose that species, which loops straight back to the first point about the fragile balance. And as we all know as divers, we need to do our bit to conserve and care about nature. We want to see more fish. So this is just something that really, really hits home, I think, when you see a fish that's not next to its coral than it should be, because it hasn't got any yet. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of the dives today and have enjoyed the dive so far. It's been a lot of fun diving with you, and I hope I get a chance to dive with you all.
No sharks equal unhealthy reef, or can we go like this straightforward, or?
Not necessarily. So on an unhealthy reef, there can still be sharks. It's more about the abundance. So.
Because here we know there are sharks, but
Yeah.
they are shy, we don't see them, but there are not so many probably as we don't see so
Yeah,
many. So
exactly. So
our reef are not so healthy then.
It's
or
not.
unbalanced.
It's not necessarily about that, but it's more the. So if you were to go to so there's an island, Cocos Island, and this is somewhere which has been heavily protected for decades already, and going there, the shark abundance is like you'll see hundreds per dive. At that level, we know that that ecosystem is pristine.
Yeah.
There is then nuances within that. So when you come somewhere like this, a national park, very well protected, there is beautiful coral. That doesn't mean to say it's perfect, so there might be some changes in like the community structure, but there's a few other indicators of what a healthy reef is. So, you know, if there isn't sharks, like you say, they've learned to be scared of boats and tides. So it's not necessarily just that, but it's a great indicator of a healthy reef.
Now, did you say the crown of thorns belongs here?
So the crown of thorns, yeah, I will give a series of lectures.
I know, I saw a big one today.
Yeah, I did too. They're invasive in the sense that they can really boom in population, but they are native here. They do belong in Thailand. They do belong on the reefs, and in the right numbers, they are so important for the reef. The problem is, as I'll go on to later in the week, is that the Great Barrier Reef has put so much information for them being like evil for feeding on coral, which over there is true. You're having like on a dive site that we would have just been on, you'd see maybe 100. But what people are doing is taking that science for gospel in Thailand or in Japan, and they're not doing the research to actually see the impact. So people end up removing them when maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah, we saw one.
Yeah, and that's absolutely fine. So yeah, they are important.
But in Thailand, there are a lot. How Thailand? When do we start to know it become a problem of the reef? How the Thailand how we start to see a lot? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you can do it by eye, and this is something I will talk about. Like going on a dive, you can start. You can just see if you see many on one dive site, then it's worth keeping that in mind, and then you can report it. So there's a sign, but green fins is a big thing in Thailand. So they actually have some information on crown of thorns. You can report it to them. Also the DMCR, which is like the Department of Marine and Coastal Resources in Thailand. But really the only way to know whether there's too many and they need to be removed is to do research over a long period of time, like 1-2 years. Sometimes people just jump straight in and take them and they don't do the research. And it could be good, it could be the right thing, but the problem is once they're removed, we're never going to know. They've gone, they've been removed now, so we can't do the research. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thanks guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If you like this video, click here to see more like it. Please follow us on social media and feel free to like and share.